Hi guys, Sandy and Mike here today with The Real Parents, and we are here today with Angel Tucker. She is a certified human behavior consultant and also an expert personality profiler. And today we're going to talk a little bit about some behavioral issues, ADD, ADHD, and Angel's an expert on that. She's going to give us a little bit of background on what that is and what can be done about that. So thanks for being with us here today, Angel. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, can you give us a little bit of background? What is ADD and ADHD for those parents that aren't familiar?
Well, ADD is attention deficit disorder, and then ADHD is not as, it's a more used term now. It used to all be referred to as ADD, but now it's ADD, and then a separate and different thing is ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So it's actually two different things, although now a lot of people just say ADHD, but they actually are two different things.
Okay. And so we were talking briefly before, people go into the doctors, their doctor says, your child has this issue, and they walk out with some medication. That doesn't seem like that would be the right methodology of diagnosing it, but what's your take on that?
Well, it is completely the wrong methodology of diagnosing, and unfortunately, that's the way it ends up going the major majority of the time. And where it usually starts, Sandy, is in school systems, because teachers are usually a more reserved personality type where they want you to sit down and pay attention and take notes and be quiet. And the child that's normally diagnosed as ADHD is the opposite of all of those things. None of those things come naturally to what we call an I-type child, which stands for inspiring. They are easily distracted, so they didn't hear the teacher say, there's a test tomorrow because there's a butterfly somewhere in the room doing some cool tricks.
Yeah.
And so that's where their focus is. And what happens is the parents are contacted by the teacher, and the teacher says, listen, something's wrong with your child. They're moving, jumping, waving, wiggling. They didn't even hear me say there's a test tomorrow, and so forth. And because the parent doesn't understand the different personality types, they assume, hey, well, they're the professional. They must know what they're talking about. And so therefore, they consequently contact a psychologist, and guess what personality they are? Same as the teacher.
Right.
They're more detail-oriented, reserved, sit still, take notes, follow instructions, play by the rules. And an I-type child is, again, none of those things. And so, unfortunately, what happens oftentimes is they spend a few moments talking to your child, and you walk out of the office the very same day with a prescription. And this should never occur. In order to diagnose ADHD correctly, it actually takes many visits. There's blood tests involved. There's all sorts of things involved that are different evaluations to make sure that it truly is ADHD that your child is suffering from.
Right. Interesting. So now there's different. We talked a little bit before in an earlier video about the different personality types. Do you want to go briefly through those now so people who haven't seen the first video would have an idea of what we're talking about with the personalities?
Okay, sure. The D is the dominant, and that's the child that likes to have things done their way. They're the boss and likes to tell everybody what to do and tends to be argumentative.
Okay.
The I is the one that likes to goof off and have fun and be the life of the party and the center of attention, and that stands for inspiring.
Okay.
S is supportive, and that's your little kumbaya child, the one that doesn't like to cause trouble and likes to keep peace, and a very loving and caring child. And then C is your cautious child, which is your very deep thinker, usually a very good student, doesn't like to get dirty and likes things organized and likes to keep a routine. So those are your four different types. And the I child is the one that we're focusing on in this segment because that's the one that's very often misdiagnosed.
Okay, so the traits of an I child would be what would be more detailed traits of them. An
I-type child is not a naturally good student. They move, jump, wave, and wiggle. They like to goof off and have fun, but they're not good at accomplishing anything that they don't think is fun or that is more of a task orientation, such as completing homework. They're the ones that are walking home from the bus and all their homework papers are falling out of their bags. They're very disorganized. Or they do their homework and it doesn't make it back to school. Okay, so those are your I-type child. They're very fun to be around. They have lots of friends. They're high energy. They're optimistic, but a big challenge for them is when it comes to getting good grades in many subjects in school.
Okay, so now instead of going to the doctors, who's the same personality type most likely as the teacher, because that's what fits that profile for that career, I'm assuming, what would be some steps that parents could take to decide, or maybe move towards deciding if their child really has that issue or if it's their personality type?
Well, first of all, let me tell you how staggering this misdiagnosis is. There's a 97% error rate in diagnosing ADHD.
Wow.
And if you don't believe that it's that high, go to any school at any time that they're handing out medication, and you see how long that line is. Unfortunately, we live in a medicated society. It is the quick fix for everything, and our children are suffering because of that. To answer your question, the first thing you would want to do is give that child a personality assessment. Let's give them an assessment and see what their dominant traits are. Is this a high I personality? If it is, there are some natural things that you can do that are going to guide that children the way that they're meant to go, because this is a personality that's often misdiagnosed. Now, they don't attribute the whole 97%. In fact, they just did a recent study that shows 50% misdiagnosis rate comes from pesticides in fruits and vegetables. So it doesn't mean that all 97% of the misdiagnosis rate are I children, but it is a very high statistic. And also, there may be something else that's close to ADHD. There's a lot of things that are similar to ADHD that are misdiagnosed as ADHD, and so you have to be careful of that as well.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, out of those 100% of the children that are getting medication for ADHD, only 3% really may need it.
That's correct.
Wow, that's pretty scary.
It is. And that's a psychologist-rendered study. That's not my opinion.
Right. Wow. Interesting.
Wow. So you mentioned something interesting about the pesticides and harmful chemicals and toxins in the environment. I know that you do a lot of work with families that have children that have these types of challenges. Do you suggest, or is there somewhere that they can go maybe to, detoxify or change their diet, or what's the angle with that?
Well, what you would want to do is you would want to buy organic with anything that you cannot remove the peel from. For example, grapes, let's say. If it's something you can remove the peel, then you can buy regular fruits and vegetables, but make sure that you remove it before you feed it to your child, because that's where the pesticides are going to be, is in the outer layer of the fruit and vegetables. And so if you're feeding them something, say strawberries, for example, you would want to stick to organic, because then you're not going to be affected by those pesticides.
Okay, so that's
so the pesticides actually show up in what blood tests that they take? Is that what?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, they've done. This has just come out within the last, I'd say, 6 months, and so there's a lot of information to still be gathered from it. But the fact that they cause a 50% misdiagnosis rate, to me, is astounding. And so I would definitely do everything I can to avoid that. If you have a child that's exhibiting those traits, I'm not saying to do this for every child, but if you have a child that's exhibiting maybe hyperactivity or having trouble learning in school, those types of things, that would certainly be a step that you can take to try to see if maybe that's a factor.
Okay, and now for parents who are interested in taking the personality profile, obviously it benefits them in other ways than just having a hyperactive child. What's the best website they could go to get that information?
Well, they can go to my website at personalityprofiles, that has an S on the end, .org, and click on the button that says order materials, and then that's going to take them to a variety of products, one of which is an assessment for their child, and it's all done online. And I want to mention, they don't even have to know how to read. They just need to be at least 4 years old. We actually use cartoons to do the assessments with.
Okay.
And once they complete the assessment, which will take them about 20 minutes, they're going to receive an email that will have a 48-page report about their child, and it's going to let you know what their dominant personality is and what their strengths are and what their challenges are. And from there, you're going to be able to see whether there's some things that you can do that are simple, that are going to help you with that child, or whether it's something that you need to pursue the medication angle.
Okay, great. Great information. Thanks so much, Angel, for being with us today. And so your website again, personalityprofiles with an S.org. And we really appreciate your expertise. This is some real eye-opening information. Thank you. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time on The Real Parents.